was, Lady Bird's going through the books and says, wait a minute, what's all this money going to Madeline Brown for? She figured it out. The money stopped, and Madeline went public to tell what was going on. But I definitely believe her. I really do.
What about if we'd had DNA back in those days that could have proven that that son of hers
Stephen
looked just like LBJ?
Yeah, well, I didn't need DNA to tell me.
I didn't need it.
Tell me.
We sat by him for weeks.
I know. Yeah, Stephen was her son, and that was a strange thing too, because number one, he did.
And he died. Tell him where he died of.
Big ears, long arms, long fingers. You know, I mean, I had no problem believing he was the offspring of LBJ. Well, I can remember when Madeline he had a rare blood disease too that Johnson's grandmother had died from. So it ran in his family. And so he was pretty sickly, and I think he got to be in his early 30s. And all of a sudden, I can still remember that Madeline called me up in a frantic one time because he had disappeared. They put him in Parkland Hospital, I think, and then boom, nobody knew where he went. He was just gone. And that was in the latter part of a year. And we went through December and January, I think, maybe into February or maybe even March. And then all of a sudden they located him. And where was he? Bethesda Naval Hospital in Washington. And they brought him back to Dallas, and he didn't live but maybe another couple of weeks. Yes, sir.
Mr. Miles, I want to say thank you for publishing the book and having the courage to actually come forward and all the stuff you've discovered. So my question is, has anything been done? Has anyone tried to hinder your investigation in any way? In the course of you putting the book together and investigations and stuff?
I'm sorry, kind of missed it. What?
Has anyone tried to hinder you?
Oh, okay. Has there been any? I'd have to say really kind of no. I can remember back in the 70s when I was really getting onto this. In fact, I can prove to you, I've been on this for a while, because in 1975 they were talking about creating a new investigation which went on to become the Assassination Records Review Board. No, scratch that. The House Committee on Assassinations, which was done by the House. And I wrote a big story, appeared on the front page of the Star-Telegram, and it jumped to almost a full page of information, including a lot of stuff like this. And my first paragraph said, if they form a committee and if they'll do an honest job, they will find that there was a coup d'etat in the United States in 1963 with the complicity of high government officials. And they actually ran it because I had all the information lined up. But that was one time in the Star-Telegram. It doesn't go anywhere else. The mass media is what determines it.
You had mentioned Kennedy called LBJ, like Uncle Forrest and all that stuff. Do you think there's any significance to why he was killed in Dallas, or specifically in Texas, since that's where LBJ?
Yes.
I mean,
all right. Well, what's the significance of being killed in Dallas? All right. Well, number one, this was not the first attempt. Interestingly enough, a couple of months before, he made a trip to Chicago, and apparently there was a plot afoot in Chicago to assassinate him. But somehow word leaked, thanks to an FBI informant, and they changed up some of the plans, and people were looking at it, so that one didn't happen. Now, what's fascinating about that one is that I have spoken at length with Abraham Bolden, who was the first black Secret Service agent. And actually, in fact, he was put on the White House detail by Kennedy. And he was in Chicago at the time, later got set up on some phony charges and sent to prison, and he's still fighting to try to get his reputation back. But I trust him. He's just a wonderful gentleman. He says that this undercover FBI agent broke up the Chicago plot, and he doesn't know who it was, but all he understood was his name was Lee. Okay, so I got an idea that was Oswald. He broke it up in Chicago. Then there was the Miami attempt, and Kennedy was supposed to ride in a motorcade in Miami and then go to this football stadium where he was going to address the Cuban immigrants and the survivors of the Bay of Pigs. And apparently there was a plot there because they canceled the motorcade route and that he flew into the stadium in a helicopter. So, but back to your question, so Dallas, end of November, that night they were to go to Johnson City and have a big barbecue at Johnson's Ranch, and then the Kennedys next day would fly back to Washington, and that was the end of their traveling for 1963, and that would take us into 1964, which is an election year, which means there would be lots more media coverage and a lot more scrutiny of what the president's doing and where he's going, which would make an assassination attempt that much more difficult. So Dallas seemed to be the last opportunity before the '64 election. They also, I think, had to hurry up because there was always the chance that he would publicly announce that he was withdrawing from Vietnam. And if that had happened, then he gets killed, and it would have been blatantly obvious that they killed him to keep the war going, okay? As it is, he issued a national security memorandum that says begin the withdrawal of 1,000 advisors, but make no formal announcement. So since there was no formal announcement, then the debunkers can argue that, well, no, he wasn't going to do that, you know, because we don't know that. But the key thing is that Dallas, for those of you who weren't here at the time, there were no Republicans in Texas in 1963. The whole state was run by the Democratic Party. But there was a schism. The majority of Democrats were conservatives, and they were lined up behind Lyndon Johnson and his former campaign manager and then Governor John Connally. Okay, but then there was a small minority who were lined up with Senator Ralph Yarborough. And mostly his support was mostly in Austin, a little bit in Houston. And these were, I guess you'd call them progressives, or they would, at the time they were screaming and saying he was liberal, but I think in today's context, you know, he wasn't that liberal. But anyway, in fact, that's an interesting thing too. Let me clue you in here. Ralph Yarborough, who was riding between Johnson and Lady Bird in the car, well, here's Kennedy's limousine, his security people, Johnson and Lady Bird and Ralph Yarborough, and then his security people. Ralph Yarborough himself told me that at Love Field there was a bit of a squabble. In fact, they'd been squabbling the whole trip about who was going to get to sit next to Kennedy at the functions and who was going to stand by him, you know, for pictures and stuff. To me, it's reminiscence of the old Soviet Union where everybody put a lot of stock in who was standing by who on the parapet watching the parade go by, right? But he said at Love Field, Johnson was trying to get him to ride in the car with Kennedy. And Kennedy finally put his foot down, and he was demurring. He was saying, no, Governor Connally's the governor. He ought to be riding in the car. And they, no, go ahead, Ralph, get in the car, you know. Finally, he said it was Kennedy who put his foot down and turned to Connally. Connally, you're the damn governor, get in the car. So he made Connally get in the car with him. And that, to me, lends a lot of import to what is actually reported as Connally's words when the shots came in the car. He didn't say, my God, I'm hit. He didn't say, my God, they're shooting at us. He says, my God, they're going to kill us all. It's like, I knew they were going to kill him, but they're going to kill us all. And in fact, there was a lot of rumors that he was quite vocal at Parkland Hospital about what was going on until somebody obviously got to him and said, John, take it easy, you know, it was a mistake. But I could just see that, you know, if they can get Johnson's political enemy, Yarborough, to ride in the car with Kennedy, then all you have to do is pass the word, get the two guys in the back of the car. Yeah.
Did you interview Buell Blazer?
I have not talked to him personally, but I know people who are good friends of his.
I got a chance to talk to him one time, and he said that the FBI came out, and that on the morning that Oswald had driven Oswald to the work, they had a little package about 20 inches long.
Yep.
And said the FBI came out and told him he was mistaken about that length. Because there's no way you could put that gun in a 20-inch long package.
That's right. In fact, by the way, the FBI tried to get him to change the story. And the other thing is that they tried to demonstrate, because everybody said Oswald had this package with him. They asked Oswald what it was, and he said it was his lunch. okay? And we know that he would take his lunch to work. Well, both Frazier and his sister said that he had the package cupped in one hand and tucked up under his arm. So it couldn't have been any longer than about that, just about what you said, okay? And they did this over and over, and they couldn't get them to change their story. So it's buried in the way back down in the Warren Commission volumes where you don't see it. And of course, officially, he asked Oswald what it was, and Oswald said it was curtain rods. Well, keep in mind that Frazier had driven Oswald to work that morning, so that means he could have been arrested as an accomplice. So the cops had lots of leverage over him, so I think they got him to tell them anything they wanted to hear.
One other comment from Fraser. He said that he knew Oswald quite well. And he said that Oswald was the kind of guy that would be out playing with the children in the neighborhood, that there wasn't a malicious bone in his body, and he could not believe that he was capable of that murder.
I think that's true. To me, the thing is, having been in the Army myself and gone through weapons training and stuff, I was at Fort Dix, and there are 3 categories when you go on the firing range. The lowest is marksman, second one's sharpshooter, third one's expert. Pretty good story there. I went to this captain of my training unit, and I said, Captain, I understand you got a little bet going on with some of the other company commanders as to whose company will do best on the firing range. I said, I'm from Texas. I said, I guarantee I'll fire expert and bring your average up, but you got to let me wear my prescription sunglasses, because these Army glasses I was given just don't get it. I can't see that well through them, you know. And he said, okay. And I still remember that, because you go to the firing line, and I'd wear these sunglasses, and the instructors gave me all kinds of hell. They'd go, here come Hollywood, you know. But by golly, I fired expert and got me a weekend pass to New York and brought the average up, okay? So you have to understand that, because you go back and look at Oswald's shooting. When he first went in the military in '56, and they first sent him to the firing line, he couldn't even qualify. He couldn't even hit the target, much less a bullseye. And then a few months later, in December of '56, apparently he had some, that was just anathema for a Marine Corps. You know, it's not supposed to be that bad. So apparently they gave him some personalized training, either that or somebody took the test for him, because he suddenly improved, and he was 2 points into sharpshooter, which is the median level. But then, as he was getting out of the Marines, they put him back on the firing line, and he only made marksman by 1 point, the lowest of the categories, and he could only make it by 1 point. So in other words, he was a mediocre to poor shot. And let me tell you something else that nobody knows, but I'll clue you guys in. Again, having friends who are decorated military snipers, there's something called plunging fire. When you're at a high elevation and you're shooting downward at a target, gravity plays a role, okay? The bullet's gonna slowly drop a little bit, and if you're aiming right at the target, the bullet's gonna hit below. Now the snipers know this, and they take it into consideration, and they compensate for it. But Oswald was a poor shot. He didn't know sniper techniques. So there's no way that this poor shot's going to be at 6 floors up and hit 2 out of 3 shots 250 feet away with, you know, moving downhill laterally away from him with a tree in between. It just doesn't work, and I don't know anybody who is a qualified and experienced sharpshooter who has ever agreed with any of this, okay? It just doesn't work. Warren Commission, several other times, some of the TV specials, they've taken experts and they've gone out. Some of them can actually get off 3 shots in 6 seconds, but they can't hit the target with any consistency. Others can hit the target, but they can't do it in 6 seconds.
I just have one question in my mind. There's a big gap in here. Regardless of whether Lyndon Johnson ordered this thing directly or didn't, it had to be executed from the top down, as you said, from high point in government. Is there any record of anyone receiving a big promotion in the CIA about this time?
How about the guys on the Woman Commission? They got big.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, yeah.
somebody had to be
Well, turn it around. Did anybody get fired? No. Same thing with 9/11. They said it was a failure of intelligence, but did anybody even get called on the carpet? No. That's because everybody does what they're told to do in government, all right? And as I said, the two people that really benefited was Lyndon Johnson, who went into became president, and he owned a lot of money, and before long he was a multimillionaire.
Well, somebody right under him, though, had